Have you ever wondered why couples, even the ones who are deeply in love, end up fighting over things that seem ridiculously small? A dirty cup left in the sink, someone saying, "I'm fine," in a certain tone, a forgotten reply, or a pair of socks on the floor. These little moments somehow turn into arguments that feel much bigger than they should. If you've ever been in a relationship, you've seen this happen. And the truth is, these fights almost never happen because of the small issue in front of you. Small things are rarely small. Every tiny conflict carries a psychological message underneath, a message that neither partner usually expresses, but both feel very deeply. When one person gets irritated about something minor, like socks on the floor, the irritation is rarely about the socks themselves. It's about what the action represents. It might symbolize, "You don't listen to me," "You don't care about my effort," "I'm not important enough," or "You take me for granted." Every fight has two layers, the surface trigger and the hidden meaning, and couples who don't know this keep fighting about symptoms instead of the real issue. What makes things even more complicated is that every relationship has what psychologists call an emotional bank account. Every time your partner does something supportive, loving, or thoughtful, a deposit is made. Every time something hurtful or disappointing happens, a withdrawal is made. When your emotional bank account is full, small things don't bother you. You shrug them off. You laugh them away. But when the emotional bank account is running low, tiny things start to feel huge. A slightly late reply feels like you're being ignored. A forgotten task feels like you're being disrespected. A careless tone feels like an attack. The brain doesn't react to the situation itself. It reacts to what the situation means emotionally. And because the brain hates uncertainty, it fills in missing information with insecurity. So instead of thinking, "They probably forgot," you think, "They don't care." Instead of thinking, "They're tired," you think, "They're annoyed at me." This is how misunderstandings form within seconds, and misunderstandings are the birthplace of unnecessary fights. What's even deeper is that small fights in adulthood are almost always connected to childhood emotional patterns. The way you fight today is shaped by the environment you grew up in. If you grew up feeling unheard, then being ignored even slightly will hit you harder than it hits others. If you grew up being criticized often, then a small comment from your partner will feel much sharper and more personal. If your childhood was chaotic, then stability will be extremely important to you, and even tiny changes in your partner's behavior might feel unsafe. If you had to act responsible at a young age, then your partner not contributing, even in small ways, will feel overwhelming. And if affection in your childhood was inconsistent, then distance from your partner will trigger deep insecurity. In these moments, you're not just reacting to your partner, you're reacting to your past. Your partner accidentally triggers wounds they didn't create, and because these wounds are hidden and unspoken, the reaction seems out of proportion to the situation. Biology also plays a huge role. When your brain senses emotional threat, even tiny ones, it activates the fight or flight response. This system doesn't know the difference between a real physical danger and a slightly sharp tone from your partner. It reacts the same way. Your heart beats faster, your breathing changes, and your emotional brain hijacks your logical brain. This is why you sometimes react automatically or aggressively. It happens before you can think. Relationships trigger these responses more than anything else, because the person you love has the most emotional power over you. A stranger's opinion won't affect you much, but your partner's words can shake you instantly. Not because you're weak, but because you're attached. The closer you are to someone, the more sensitive your emotional system becomes. Most small arguments in relationships can be traced back to 4 psychological triggers: feeling unvalued, feeling unloved, feeling unsafe, or feeling unimportant. When any of these needs are touched, even by accident, the emotional reaction becomes intense. But people usually don't communicate these underlying feelings. Instead of saying, "I felt unimportant when you forgot what I said," someone might say, "You never listen." Instead of saying, "I felt insecure when you didn't reply," they might say, "You always ignore me." Irritation becomes the language of unspoken emotions. And because the true feeling remains hidden, both partners walk away misunderstood. This misunderstanding creates a domino effect. A tiny issue happens. The mind interprets it emotionally. You feel hurt, so your energy shifts. Your partner senses the shift and reacts defensively. The argument becomes about the reaction instead of the original issue. Old frustrations get pulled in, past mistakes get mentioned, and suddenly, a small situation becomes a much bigger one. Eventually, you're arguing not about the present moment, but about patterns, fears, and unmet needs that haven't been addressed. Small fights also happen because couples often have opposite emotional styles. One partner may be expressive while the other is quiet. One may be emotional while the other is logical. One may want to talk immediately while the other needs time to process. One may crave structure while the other thrives in spontaneity. One may be naturally tidy while the other has a more relaxed approach. These differences aren't problems, they're natural, but without understanding them, every small friction turns into a misunderstanding. The expressive partner thinks the quiet partner doesn't care. The logical partner thinks the emotional partner is overreacting. The spontaneous partner thinks the planner is controlling. The clean partner thinks the messy partner is irresponsible. None of these interpretations are fully true, but they feel true emotionally. Then there's ego, the silent destroyer. Ego is not arrogance, it's the psychological mechanism that protects us from feeling wrong, blamed, or vulnerable. Ego hates admitting mistakes. Ego hates apologizing first. Ego hates being criticized. So when a small issue comes up, ego steps in and says, "It's not your fault. They're exaggerating. They're attacking you." Or, "You need to defend yourself." Once ego takes control, the goal of the conversation shifts from understanding to winning, and you cannot win a fight without making your partner lose. Relationships are not destroyed by big issues. They are destroyed by two egos that refuse to soften. The truth is, emotional needs are loudest in the smallest moments. When someone hasn't felt appreciated, even a tiny criticism hurts deeply. When someone hasn't felt loved, even a brief distance feels threatening. When someone hasn't felt secure, even minor unpredictability feels overwhelming. And when someone hasn't felt seen or heard, even a small interruption feels dismissive. Small fights are not problems, they're signals. They're emotional alarms saying, "Pay attention, something deeper needs care." And here is one of the most important insights. When emotional connection drops, sensitivity increases. When you and your partner are emotionally close, you naturally give each other grace. You overlook flaws. You let things go. But when emotional connection weakens, due to stress, busy schedules, lack of quality time, misunderstandings, or daily exhaustion, everything becomes magnified. A tone sounds harsher. A forgetful moment feels intentional. A distraction feels like rejection. Many couples think they have relationship problems, but they actually have connection problems. When connection is strong, small things stay small. When connection weakens, small things turn into emotional earthquakes. Another major reason couples fight over small things is linked to attachment styles, the emotional templates we develop early in life that shape how we love, how we connect, and how we react to conflict. Each person brings a different attachment system into the relationship, and these systems determine how sensitive you are to certain emotional triggers. For example, someone with an anxious attachment style tends to fear distance or emotional withdrawal. So when their partner replies late, seems distracted, or forgets something small, they don't just see it as minor. Their body interprets it as danger, as a sign that love is fading or slipping away. Their mind automatically jumps to worst-case scenarios, not because they're dramatic, but because their nervous system is wired to anticipate abandonment. On the other hand, someone with avoidant attachment might feel overwhelmed when there's too much emotional intensity. They value independence and space. So when their partner questions them, asks too many emotional questions, or seems upset over something small, it triggers their fear of being trapped or smothered. They pull away, not out of disrespect, but out of self-protection. These two styles often end up together, creating a cycle where both partners accidentally trigger each other's deepest fears without meaning to. This creates what psychologists call the pursue-withdraw cycle. One partner feels anxious, so they pursue closeness. The other feels overwhelmed, so they pull away. The more one pursues, the more the other withdraws. And the more the other withdraws, the more the first partner panics. This cycle can begin from the smallest issue, like a tone of voice or a delayed reply, because the emotional meaning is huge for both people. The cycle often accelerates because neither partner understands what's happening beneath the surface. The anxious partner thinks, "Why don't you care? Why are you cold?" The avoidant partner thinks, "Why are you attacking me? Why can't you calm down?" And both feel misunderstood. When you don't understand each other's attachment patterns, small moments feel threatening instead of neutral. Another layer to small fights is emotional mirroring. Humans unconsciously copy the emotional energy they receive. If one partner becomes tense, the other becomes tense too. If one becomes sarcastic, the other responds with defensiveness. If one becomes cold, the other becomes hurt and reactive. This mirroring creates escalation even when neither partner wants it. A slightly annoyed tone can cause defensiveness. Defensiveness can cause irritation. Irritation leads to criticism. Criticism leads to withdrawing. And withdrawing leads to another person feeling abandoned. Suddenly, a very small issue, like forgetting to close a cupboard, turns into a conversation about feeling unappreciated, unloved, or disrespected. And what started as a simple moment becomes an emotional storm. A huge part of why couples fight over small things is the accumulation of emotional residue. Emotional residue is what's left behind after unresolved hurt, unexpressed frustration, and unspoken needs pile up. When couples don't talk about the deeper issues, like loneliness in the relationship, lack of affection, feeling unheard, or feeling overwhelmed, those emotions don't disappear. They stay under the surface, waiting for the next tiny trigger. So when someone leaves dishes in the sink or uses a certain tone, it's not just that moment causing the reaction. It's the weight of everything that hasn't been addressed. This is why couples often explode during small arguments. They are not reacting to the present moment, but to the accumulated feelings from weeks, months, or even years of emotional buildup. Another fundamental reason couples fight over small things is emotional miscommunication. Most people assume their partner understands their emotional language, but every person expresses love and stress differently. Some people communicate stress by becoming quiet. Others communicate stress by talking more. Some communicate love through actions. Others do it through words, affection, or quality time. When emotional languages don't match, partners start misreading each other. If someone shows love through doing things like helping with errands, fixing things, or working hard, they may not realize their partner needs verbal reassurance or physical closeness. So when the partner feels unloved, the first person feels confused because they believe they're showing plenty of love. This mismatch in emotional languages becomes noticeable through the smallest actions. A partner who feels unloved may interpret a small forgotten gesture as proof of emotional distance. Meanwhile, the other partner may interpret their complaints as ungratefulness. This misalignment creates an environment where everything feels emotionally loaded. One of the deepest truths about relationships is that small fights often reveal unmet emotional needs that neither partner is consciously aware of. Some people need reassurance more than others. Some need predictability. Some need affection. Some need verbal acknowledgement. When these needs go unmet, even unintentionally, the unmet need begins to express itself through irritation, impatience, or emotional overreaction. A partner who doesn't feel appreciated will be more reactive to criticism. A partner who doesn't feel secure will be more reactive to silence. A partner who doesn't feel connected will be more reactive to distance. These needs don't express themselves directly. They show up as sensitivity to the smallest things. Another reason small fights occur is related to emotional timing. When couples are stressed from work, tired, or mentally overwhelmed, their emotional tolerance becomes lower. The brain's capacity for patience, empathy, and self-regulation decreases drastically when someone is exhausted or mentally drained. So something trivial, a misheard sentence, a forgotten item, or a slightly wrong tone can feel like a personal attack. Stress, when not addressed, becomes misdirected at the partner. This is why couples tend to fight more at night, after work, or when life becomes hectic. Not because the relationship is failing, but because both nervous systems are overloaded. Couples also fight over small things because of unspoken expectations. Every person brings unspoken rules about how a partner should behave, many of which are inherited from family habits, culture, past relationships, or personal values. One partner might believe that love means constant communication. Another might believe that love means giving space. One might feel that chores should be shared equally. Another might feel that the person who cares more about cleanliness naturally does more. One might think affection should happen daily. Another might not see daily affection as necessary. These unspoken expectations clash quietly in day-to-day life, and because they're not discussed, the disappointment shows up through small fights. Ego also continues to play a major role in every small conflict. Ego wants to protect itself from discomfort. When someone points out something small you did wrong, your ego doesn't hear, "This bothers me." It hears, "You're not good enough." So the ego triggers defensiveness before the heart can trigger empathy. Ego says, "You're criticizing me." Empathy says, "You're hurting and trying to tell me something." But ego reacts first. And once ego enters the conversation, both partners begin talking from a place of self-protection rather than connection. This is how small issues turn into power struggles. Another reason small fights get big is that many people struggle with emotional vulnerability. Vulnerability requires opening up and saying things like, "I felt ignored. I felt scared. I felt unimportant. I felt disconnected." But these admissions feel risky. They require trust. They require letting go of pride. So instead of saying what hurts, people show their pain through irritation or anger. Anger is easier than vulnerability because anger feels powerful. Vulnerability feels exposed. So couples fight about behavior instead of talking about feelings, and every unspoken feeling becomes another unhealed wound. Something else that intensifies small fights is the psychological concept of emotional projection. This happens when someone feels stressed, insecure, or inadequate in their own life and unintentionally projects those emotions onto their partner. A person who feels insecure about their job may become sensitive to criticism at home. A person who feels overwhelmed by responsibilities may become irritated when their partner forgets something small. A person who feels unimportant in their social life may struggle when their partner seems distracted. Projection is powerful because it makes the partner an emotional target for feelings that aren't actually caused by them. There's also the problem of assumptions. Humans naturally assume we know what our partner means, what they intended, and why they did something. But many times, the assumption is wrong. A partner may assume their silent spouse is angry when they're simply tired. They may assume a forgotten task is intentional when it was an honest mistake. They may assume distance means disinterest when it might mean stress or anxiety. Assumptions turn innocent moments into emotional arguments. And because assumptions feel real, they create real pain, even if the partner had no negative intention at all. Another overlooked reason small fights happen is because partners take each other's emotional availability for granted. When people become comfortable in a relationship, they stop expressing appreciation as often. They stop doing the little romantic gestures that once came naturally. They stop giving as much intentional attention. Over time, these small losses create emotional gaps, and those gaps become breeding grounds for frustration. Small irritations fill the space where affection and connection used to exist. The fights aren't about the tiny issue. They're about the emotional gap created by routine, comfort, and complacency. One of the most surprising psychological reasons couples fight over small things is the lack of emotional rituals. Emotional rituals are tiny moments that keep connection alive. Saying good morning, checking in during the day, sharing meals, hugging regularly, or expressing gratitude. These rituals regulate the nervous system and strengthen emotional attachment. When these rituals fade, couples unconsciously feel disconnected. And when people feel disconnected, their emotional sensitivity increases. The smallest thing suddenly feels bigger because the relationship lacks the daily emotional glue that keeps things smooth. Another reason small fights become big is because couples misunderstand the difference between content and process. Content is the topic of the argument: dishes, laundry, tone, forgetting something. Process is how the argument is happening: criticism, defensiveness, sarcasm, avoidance. Relationships rarely break because of content. They break because of the process: tone, timing, lack of empathy, or emotional withdrawal. You can solve content, but once the process becomes negative, even small content becomes a big problem. Finally, small fights often happen because the relationship lacks repair, not prevention. No relationship can avoid mistakes. People will forget things. People will use the wrong tone. People will misunderstand each other. The healthiest relationships aren't the ones with the fewest conflicts. They're the ones with the strongest repair. When hurt feelings are addressed lovingly, when vulnerability is encouraged, and when both partners apologize sincerely, small fights lose their power. They stay small. But when hurt is not repaired, even the smallest conflicts become emotional scars. Now that we understand why couples fight over small things, the next step is learning how to break the cycle. Most couples try to fix their problems by controlling the surface behavior, reminding each other not to forget chores, not to use a certain tone, not to be late, not to leave things around. But surface behavior is not the root. The real root is emotional. If the emotional layer stays unaddressed, even if the behavior changes for a short time, the emotional tension will still come back in another form. This is why the same arguments return again and again, even after promises to do better or try harder. Fixing the behavior doesn't fix the deeper emotional meaning underneath it. So the first step in breaking the cycle is shifting from what happened to what did it mean to me emotionally? Because when you address the emotional meaning, the behavior starts to matter less. One of the most powerful ways to stop small fights is to pause and identify what you're actually feeling underneath the irritation. Not what you're saying, but what you're feeling. For example, if someone says, "You never listen to me," the real feeling might be, "I feel unimportant." If someone says, "You always forget things," the real feeling might be, "I feel like I don't matter." When you're annoyed that your partner didn't text back, the irritation might actually be anxiety or insecurity. When you're upset over a tone, the real feeling might be vulnerability or fear of conflict. If you catch yourself before reacting and ask, "What is the real emotion here?" you instantly slow down the emotional explosion. You shift from reactive brain to reflective brain. This alone can stop a small fight from turning into a bigger one. Another psychological technique that prevents escalation is letting go of the assumption that your partner's behavior is intentional. Many fights begin because one or both partners assume negative intent. A late reply becomes, "You're ignoring me." A calm tone becomes, "You don't care." A forgotten task becomes, "You don't take me seriously." But most partners are not intentionally trying to hurt each other. They're just distracted, tired, overwhelmed, or unaware. When you replace assumption with curiosity, the emotional tone changes entirely. Instead of, "Why didn't you reply?" you ask, "Hey, are you okay? I didn't hear back from you." Instead of, "Why did you use that tone?" you ask, "Something feels off. Did something happen today?" This shift from accusation to curiosity instantly lowers defensiveness and increases emotional safety. Another key to stopping small fights is learning how to regulate your nervous system during conflict. When you feel triggered, your emotional brain takes over. Your heart beats faster, your body tenses, and your instinct is to fight or withdraw. In those moments, no amount of logic helps because your body is in survival mode. The solution is not to push through it, but to pause. Take a breath, step away for a minute, or simply say, "I need a moment to calm down so I don't say something I don't mean." Couples often fear taking breaks because they think it means avoiding the issue. But a break is not avoidance, it's regulation. A regulated nervous system makes communication possible. An unregulated nervous system makes conflict inevitable. The healthiest couples don't avoid breaks, they use them wisely. Another transformative shift comes from changing the goal of arguments. Most people enter arguments trying to be understood. But the truth is, relationships thrive when both partners aim to understand first. When your partner feels understood, they naturally soften and become more open to understanding you. Many couples don't realize that validation is not agreement. You can validate your partner's feelings even if you see the situation differently. Validation sounds like, "I see why that upset you," or "I understand why you felt that way." It doesn't mean you admit fault, it means you acknowledge their emotional reality. And acknowledgement is often all the heart needs to settle down. Preventing small fights also requires shifting from blame to teamwork. When something goes wrong, rather than asking, "Who's at fault?" ask, "How can we solve this together?" The mindset of me versus you creates defensiveness. The mindset of us versus the problem creates unity. When couples face challenges as a team, even small problems feel manageable rather than emotionally loaded. This shift alone can change the tone of an entire relationship. Another powerful strategy is learning how to communicate needs clearly and calmly. Many small fights happen because needs are expressed through irritation instead of vulnerability. Saying, "You never pay attention," triggers defensiveness. Saying, "I feel disconnected and I'd love some attention," invites closeness. Instead of saying, "Why do you always forget?" say, "It would mean a lot to me if you remembered this because it makes me feel valued." When needs are expressed with vulnerability instead of accusation, partners respond with empathy instead of defensiveness. Vulnerability is the bridge that turns conflict into connection. One of the biggest steps in reducing small fights is identifying emotional triggers. Everyone has triggers, certain situations that activate old wounds or fears. The key is not to avoid triggers, but to recognize them. When you know your own triggers, you can communicate them clearly. For example, when you walk away in an argument, I panic because it reminds me of past abandonment. Or, when you speak loudly, I shut down because I associate loud voices with past conflict. Sharing triggers builds emotional intimacy and helps your partner understand you instead of reacting to you. And when both partners understand each other's triggers, they unintentionally hurt each other far less often. It's also important to repair conflict quickly after it happens. Many couples believe that time heals arguments, but time only suppresses them. Unrepaired conflict becomes resentment. Repair is about approaching your partner with sincerity and saying, "Hey, earlier it got messy. I care about us. Can we talk about what happened?" Repair is not about being right, it's about restoring the connection. Couples who repair quickly rarely build long-term resentment. Couples who don't repair slowly accumulate emotional distance, and emotional distance is the breeding ground for small fights. Another major part of preventing small fights is understanding tone. The same sentence can either calm or inflame depending on how it's said. For example, "What's wrong?" can sound caring or accusatory. "Why didn't you tell me?" can sound curious or attacking. Partners need to become aware not just of what they say, but how they say it. Tone is the emotional carrier of communication. If you soften your tone, conflicts naturally shrink. If your tone becomes sharp, conflicts naturally grow. Couples also need emotional rituals to maintain connection. Simple rituals like greeting each other warmly, checking in during the day, spending device-free time together, or hugging regularly keep the emotional bond strong. When the emotional bond is strong, small issues bounce off instead of sticking. Emotional rituals might seem small, but they act as the glue that prevents small fights from becoming bigger ones. Couples who maintain daily emotional connection have fewer misunderstandings and far fewer unnecessary arguments. Another vital part of preventing escalation is learning to recognize when a small fight is not actually about the present moment. Sometimes you're not mad about dishes, you're mad about feeling overwhelmed. You're not upset about a late reply, you're upset about feeling disconnected. You're not fighting about tone, you're fighting about feeling unappreciated for months. When you sense that the argument is bigger than the moment, pause and ask yourself, what am I really needing here? Most of the time, the need is simple: connection, reassurance, affection, validation, or understanding. But because you don't express the need directly, it comes out sideways through irritation. Most couples also need to learn how to apologize in a way that actually repairs. Many people apologize for the behavior, not the emotion. They say, "I'm sorry I forgot," instead of, "I'm sorry you felt unimportant because I forgot." When apologies address the emotional impact, not just the action, they become powerful. The goal of an apology is not to admit fault, but to restore emotional safety. A sincere apology can erase the emotional weight of dozens of small fights. A powerful technique that therapists use with couples is slowing the conversation. When conflict rises, people speak faster, interrupt more, and listen less. Slowing down, speaking gently, pausing between sentences, letting your partner finish, changes the entire emotional tone. Slower conversations reduce nervous system activation. Faster conversations escalate it. Slowing down is not passive, it's intentional. Another insight that helps is this: your partner is not your enemy. When you view your partner as someone who is hurting you, you activate defensiveness. When you view them as someone who is hurting with you, you activate compassion. Most fights come from misunderstandings, not malice. From human flaws, not intentional harm. When you assume your partner has good intentions, even during conflict, everything becomes softer. And perhaps one of the biggest keys to ending small fights is reconnecting emotionally outside of conflict. When couples nurture their bond through shared laughter, affection, quality time, deep conversation, appreciation, and intimacy, they build emotional safety. Emotional safety is the foundation of all calm communication. When emotional safety is strong, the relationship becomes a refuge instead of a battleground. In emotionally safe relationships, small issues are resolved quickly and gently. In emotionally unsafe relationships, small issues turn into emotional wars.